Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to News and Views on Salam Media with Fazlin Franceman Talib. Our first segment today, we're going to be talking about the national and provincial elections, but specifically within the context of expats. Now, we know there are many South Africans living all over the world, and obviously they also want to have a role in deciding the future of our country. Specifically today, we're going to be talking to Hayley Reichert, who is a London-based South African, and we're going to be talking about what elections looks like abroad. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, Hayley. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really well, thank you.
Good. Hayley, so obviously, maybe let's start at the beginning. Have you ever voted abroad, or while being abroad, have you voted, and what does that procedure look like?
Yes, so I did vote for the first time ever back in 2014. I used to be a member of the DA abroad, and then I couldn't vote in 2019 because those abroad previously had to have both ID and passport, and my passport had expired, and the time to get documents abroad is quite a schlep. So voting abroad, we only get the national ballot. With this year, it's slightly different because there's 3 ballots, so we are disenfranchised on that second national ballot. We do not get the ballot to vote for independent candidates. We only get the national ballot with parties. So much like voting back home, we go to our nearest voting station. Access to voting is a huge problem. We can only vote in person at our nearest foreign mission. Overseas voting is deemed a special vote. There's no other alternatives for us. So a lot of people have to travel a great distance. I am fortunate that I live close to the City of London, and I previously voted in London, and I will be voting again next weekend in London as well. So same queuing. The London is going to be the biggest voting station across the entire election, including stations back in South Africa. We have 24,500 people registered. I am anticipating at least 16,000 people. So the IEC have made it over 2 days. They have made a change pure only for London. So those in some Middle Eastern foreign missions will be voting on Friday the 17th because their work week is slightly different. Most other voting stations, well, everywhere else will be Saturday the 18th of May. London is Saturday the 18th and Sunday the 19th. And then the busier stations, they've extended the voting hours. So overseas is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but they've extended it until 9 p.m. for some voting stations. Much the same as you guys. We go in, we have our name checked off on the ballot, on the voters roll, issued the ballot paper, made sure it's stamped in front of us, otherwise it won't be counted, and casting our votes much like everybody else.
So I think you highlighted the fact that, and I think probably also we're quite aware of the fact that specifically in the UK there is a big contingent of South Africans. Whether or not they're going to vote, obviously that's a different question. But do you think that the time frame that is allocated specifically to vote, and you can talk about the time frame during the day. I know you mentioned 2 days. Do you think that is sufficient? Yeah.
Yes, I am very, very grateful to the IEC and DIRCA for making that allowance because initially when they when the government issued the official election schedule, it was only going to be 1 day, so it was only going to be Saturday, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Historically, we've been allowed until 9 p.m. At all foreign missions. So I was trying to get people to email them to lobby. When I had meetings with the SA High Commission at the end of February, and I kind of highlighted we will not be able to get the high number of people at that stage. It was before VEC10 submissions, which is out of country notice submissions. So we were sitting on just under 20,000 people when I worked out. So I basically put forward a proposal to them to change their plans because what they had initially suggested they would not have enough IC staff, they would not have enough voting booths, they would not get people through the door, and each voter would literally have, if they were lucky, 2 minutes in and out that door, which is not enough time. You cannot rush a voter. So thankfully they have taken that on board. They have made significant changes. They will be using a much larger area, and given the 2 days, most people are still, I think, going to come on Saturday because most people have already made arrangements to come on the Saturday.
Mm.
So I'm anticipating at least 10 to 12,000 will be coming through those doors on the Saturday, and the balance on the Sunday. But I'm very, very grateful that they have made that allowance. And as we know, although that they've extended to 9 p.m. as well. So as long as you are in that queue before 9 p.m. on either of those 2 days, they will just close the back of the queue come 9 o'clock, and then they will continue allowing people to vote. So just in my interactions with them and with the IEC as well, and with Westminster Council, because they are closing off a road that runs alongside the High Commission for queuing purposes. So I am confident that they will get everyone through those doors. I will be on hand from first thing in the morning right through until closure. I'm actually acting as an observer for Groundwork Collective, which is an organisation run by Bali and Tuli, who's a former MPL and former DA youth leader. And so there are some of us operating as independent observers during the day to monitor things, and then there is still a call for people who not just London but any foreign mission to act as party agents as well if they wish, to ensure that all protocols are followed in the foreign missions, and that it is a free and fair election.
So, if I, for example, was somebody that just happened to be abroad in the coming week, right? Would I have had to register to vote abroad, specifically in those countries, has the opportunity been lost, and I need to obviously vote? And I'm asking this because I'm sure that there are many people that have either immigrated recently and they don't necessarily understand all these technicalities. So if you can just elaborate on what is possible, what isn't possible, who can actually go vote and who can't.
Sure. So the process is that you had to either register, or if you were already registered and needed to re-register, so if you have immigrated and you needed to change your voting station up until the voters' roll closed on the 23rd of February, if for whatever reason you hadn't changed your voting station to your foreign mission abroad, then there was the VEC 10 opportunity, which closed on the 22nd of April. So if you did not either register or re-register or submit a VEC 10 form before that deadline to change your voting station to vote abroad, then unfortunately, if you're still registered and your registration is still showing back in South Africa, unfortunately, you will not be able to vote abroad. The only option for you then, if you are able to be in South Africa, you have until the 17th of May to submit a Section 24A form, and that is for you to change your voting station to any voting station within South Africa. Understandably, it is a huge logistical, I'd say nightmare almost. And obviously with all the court cases going on, the IEC have been under so much pressure. So they have to make sure that all the ballots are printed, that they have sufficient staff allocated between the DIRCO staff. The IEC are sending some staff over to London for next week because of the numbers. They have to make sure that they have enough voting booths and all the necessary equipment and logistics and merchandise and things that they need. So they do have to have a cutoff point at some stage. It is incredibly frustrating. Lots of people overseas saying, are there no other options for voting? Access to voting is a massive problem. People have to travel long distances to travel to the nearest foreign mission. So everyone up in Manchester, Scotland have to come down to London. People in the Cayman Islands have to fly to either New York or Jamaica. People people have to travel across countries sometimes. So access to voting is a massive issue, and the DA obviously had their court case, which the Electoral Court didn't take into account. So when they issued the court case, they made the ruling for consulates and honorary consulates, but an honorary consulate is only a person. So you've got a foreign mission, you've got a high commission, an embassy, a consulate, which typically have offices, and then where South African law applies, and then you have an honorary consulate, which is just a person, usually for bilateral relations. They don't actually have an official office. So they didn't take into account international laws and best practices. But going forward after this election, it is something I want to look into, to lobbying. So we would have to go to court. We would have to lobby for the change of the current legislation and regulations, because again, it is deemed a special vote. So we cannot, we have those deadlines in place. So people at the moment, if they've suddenly got a work trip coming up, they and they're going to be abroad. They're going to be in South Africa when it's voting abroad, and they're going to be abroad when it's voting in South Africa. There are some people who unfortunately will not be able to vote. And then there's no option for online voting. And I know because of the high numbers, I know that the Westminster Council here in London have said to the South African High Commission, and I do have evidence of that, that they do need to make alternatives. There is no postal vote, there is no online vote, there are no more voting stations where there are key numbers of South Africans. So, and also you have to use your ID book. So fortunately, you no longer have to use a passport because access to consular services is problematic around the world. However, hopefully once the loss of citizenship court case has been approved by the Constitutional Court, that was something I started 10 years ago, then hopefully we can also lobby for change. Why can you not use a passport or an ID book? Because nobody else uses an ID outside the country. So lots of people don't have ID books, therefore they cannot vote. So there's quite a lot of things that are stopping people. There's more than 1 million South Africans living abroad, but only 78,000 have registered. So yeah, there's quite a few things that I am hoping to try and change ahead of the 2029 election.
Hayley, we're going to go to an ad break and we'll be back right after the break to chat more just about, what the campaigning has been looking like from different political parties specifically, whether it is in the UK, but just generally, and how that information has been accessed. So join us after the break.
Perfect.
This is Salam Media.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Contact Lenasia Livestock and Poultry for all your Sadaka, Akika and Qurbani requirements. We offer clean, hygienic abattoir style and refrigeration facilities. Sheep, goats and cows are available at competitive market-related prices, direct to the public. We slaughter, slice and distribute in your behalf, but that's not all. Introducing Meatmasters Halal Butchery, our sister company situated on our farm in Lenasia. Unbeatable prices on lamb, beef and chicken. Lenasia Livestock and Poultry. Livestock is our business. We are Sanha approved. Telephone 011 857 1774. Call now.
After the recent attacks on Gaza, many families have been displaced with their homes left destroyed. Through your donations, our teams are on the ground in Gaza, providing support and delivering necessary aid to families affected. The people of Gaza need your help. Give hope. Donate today to Penny Appeal South Africa. www.pennyappeal.org.za 031 1100 573.
We are here on the ground with Penny Appeal organizations in Gaza.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Welcome back to Salam Media, News and Views with Fazl and Fransman Talib. We're talking about our upcoming elections, but specifically how expats abroad are going to be voting in the next few weeks. Online, we have Hayley Reichert. Hayley, who is based in London. Hayley, welcome back.
Thank you.
So just in terms of the campaigning, now obviously locally or within the context of South Africa, we have seen a myriad of political parties, trying to capture different segments of the vote. I mean, I know historically the Democratic Alliance have had sort of like branches in various parts of the world outside of South Africa, but I don't know what that looks like for other political parties and what campaigning looks like for other political parties. So if you can perhaps unpack or take us through that.
Sure. So, political parties do have financial restrictions, and obviously a lot of their resources are spent on the ground. So the DA have the DA abroad, which I used to be a member of, and they've been going for more than 10 years now. Most people abroad only really know three parties, which is the DA, EFF, and ANC. So the DA does get most of the overseas votes. They did have, I think 2014, it was about close on 80%. In 2019, it was just under 75% of the overseas votes. Obviously, those numbers are really low. 90% of South Africans living abroad do vote opposition. So in terms of campaigning, it is really, really difficult for these parties. But I have put forward to these parties in the last couple of weeks for them to consider. Obviously, everyone's just kind of hunkered down and focusing on this election. But going forward, I do think these parties should be looking to South Africans abroad. Again, there's more than 1 million of us. If we can improve access to voting, I do think a lot of the key, particularly the key opposition parties, would get some support from those abroad. But they do have to focus their resources on home soil, understandably. So it is mainly DA abroad that run campaigning overseas and that have a good network. I have been helping behind the scenes setting up Rise Mzansi Global in the last few weeks. I'm actually doing an event, a pre-election braai event in South Wimbledon tomorrow afternoon with Rise Mzansi. So I've just come back from a trip. I spent 10 days traveling around Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban and Cape Town, met with about 9 different parties, a number of other meetings, just to kind of see what's going on the ground, doing some outreach, some campaigning with some of those parties. Because I understand the limitations, and I engage with a number of opposition party leaders, so I understand they are extremely limited. They, spending, we saw release yesterday that it's the DA that are spending the most online on campaigning. So reaching the South Africans abroad, being as spread out as they are, it is really difficult. And I think that's partly why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because, again, not, people hear of these parties, but they don't really understand them. So part of what I'm doing, so I've set up an initiative called Operation Watershed, which is a civic initiative, which is trying to, and I've been spending the last few months trying to engage South Africans abroad to encourage them to turn out to vote, even though it requires a huge amount of effort and often cost, but also trying to educate them on the different parties as well. So, on Action SA, Rise Mzansi, the Freedom Front, all the, the different multi-party charter parties, UIM, those kind of guys, Build One SA, and trying to educate them and also trying to encourage them to go and do their homework before they cast their vote. Do their homework on the policies, the manifestos, but also the values of the parties, the credentials, of the leadership of the parties, and also the characters as well. And that was a big reason why I did a similar trip last year. And this one of the last 2 weeks, to be face to face with party leaders and to engage them one-on-one, because people do business with people they like and trust. People are going to vote for people they like and trust. And not having, and even guys in South Africa, not having that direct access to party leaders, you can pick up a lot on people's energies, their body language, their facial expressions. And I think it's really, really important. Politicians are always going to be selling themselves because they want your vote. So for me, it's really kind of seeing who the people are behind that mask has been a really important. That's going to be playing a really key role in who I choose. I haven't decided yet who I'm voting for, but that is going to be a really key thing as well as looking at manifestos and policies and things like that, because you can have the best thing written down on paper, but who people are as individuals is really important. So I did this trip, and I did the trip last year, and I've been trying to kind of take people along that journey with me, posting videos whilst I was in South Africa, and I will be doing I've got the event tomorrow, and then we'll be doing videos over the next week leading up to our those of us abroad voting next weekend, and just trying to help people really take this vote seriously, and really do their homework and vote strategically rather than emotionally.
So Hayley, I mean, we know that there, as you mentioned at the start of the interview, there are quite a number of South Africans living abroad, and I think you've highlighted some of the the changes that have been made, specifically in the context of the UK to accommodate different factors. But I want us to perhaps just focus on what are some of the challenges that are still persisting for people not just in the UK. And I think this is where we want to broaden it now to a conversation that is, across the world. What are some of the challenges? Do we have enough voting stations in enough countries, and how do we actually decide, for example, which countries get and which countries have no focus at all, for example?
Sure. So I'm just going to quickly, because I've jotted this down. So the next biggest voting stations, Netherlands has 6,659 voters. Canberra in Australia, 3,674. That one is really low, considering we believe that there are potentially tens of thousands of South Africans living in Perth alone. So that was the DA's court case, came off the back of people in Perth wanting to be able to vote at their consulate. So Dubai 3,266, Dublin 3,040, New Zealand just over 2,000, Abu Dhabi 1,825, New York 1,799, Washington 1.5, Berlin just under 1.5. So there are many more South Africans. Again, we do not have enough voting stations abroad because you can only vote to foreign missions. We believe that there are, I think there's about 20,000 in Australia, in Israel that cannot vote because of the situation, the Israel-Palestine conflict. They are not opening our South African foreign mission there. So those are Ukraine as well, and Sudan, I think, they are remaining closed. So those voters are disenfranchised. And then the key issue is where our foreign missions are based is not necessarily where there are high numbers of South Africans. So we definitely need to look at improving access to voting, more voting stations, temporary voting stations. As I mentioned before, it's international laws apply there, so we need to go and do our homework and see what is possible. Online voting would be the best option. Obviously, that opens up a whole new can of worms with security of those votes and what that system would look like. We did have a lot of issues with the IEC's online voter registration portal for South Africans abroad. And fortunately, because I built a relationship with the IEC, they were accommodating. There were some registrations going through, but we did have a lot of people complaining because of the lagging of their system. It was rejecting, it wasn't uploading their documents. So it was uploading the documents and verifying them at the same time. So fortunately, because of all the complaints, the IEC did create a manual. So they uploaded the documents, manually checked them before it was approved, which helped a lot of people. So yeah, access to voting is a huge problem. Access to documents, consular services in New Zealand, it takes up to 18 months just to get a passport. So again, we have to use our ID books to vote. People don't have, just to get a birth certificate takes months on end. Then you got to have that before you can apply for ID books and things. So massive need to drive lobbying for improved access to consular services, and a lot of people who've lost their citizenship. So we were hoping that the court case, so the DA took it to the loss of citizenship, which is something that I'd started back in 2014 when I noticed so many South Africans went to go register but have been told they lost their citizenship. So they lost twice. They then took it to the Supreme Court of Appeal and won last year, but the Constitutional Court still has not approved the Supreme Court of Appeals ruling. There was some movement, I think a month or so ago. So once that is over the line, then those who have lost their citizenship will be able to get their citizenship back without having to move back to South Africa, and then they can get the necessary documents. So yeah, there are a lot of restrictions. Not everyone can afford a train ticket, a plane ticket to be able to get to the nearest foreign mission. So prize would be online voting. Secondary would be setting up satellite voting stations again, following whatever international laws apply. If we can get more voting stations, just having one in Edinburgh and one in Manchester here in the UK would help a lot. For example, in Canada is a big problem. A lot of people living in, I think it's, I've gone blank on, I think it's Ottawa, and I've forgotten the other one where people can vote, but a lot of people living in other key cities where there is no access to voting, and the cost for people to travel. Also, there were 13 foreign missions that have closed in the last couple of years. So Chicago is a big one. America is so vast. So whereas there used to be 4, so you used to be able to Washington, New York, Las Vegas, and Chicago, lots of people who would have ordinarily gone to vote in Chicago can no longer do so. And we know that there's no money in the kids' heath with DIRCO, so there is potential that more foreign missions might close in the years to come. So again, this is why my call to South Africans abroad: if you want to have a say, if you want better access to voting, if you want to see a better South Africa, that's exactly why I've set up the civic organization Operation Watershed, because I want South Africans abroad, majority of them, if they saw South Africa, if there was a possibility that South Africa would turn a corner and improve, a lot of them would be considering moving home. There are a lot of South Africans moving home. So for me, it's a case of we can't sit back and moan and complain and do nothing. We have to step up. We have to fight for better access to consular services, better access to voting, but also beyond that, it's not just about voting once every 5 years. It's the in-between bits. There are so many projects, and doing this project now, there's just so much information that I gathered from the parties, from other civic organizations. There's so many ways that South Africans abroad, each contributing just a tiny bit, whether it be financially, whether it be giving of their time, doing some research, helping with lobbying. There's so many ways that South Africans abroad can drive tangible and sustainable change in South Africa. And who knows, my long goal is to move home. That's why I'm doing this, because I want to make sure that there is a South Africa that is a viable option for me to return to one day. So I'm trying to take all the other South Africans on that journey with me, because there is so much potential in South Africa. And I really do want to see in my lifetime South Africa turn a corner and be on the right path. So yeah, it literally is up to every single one of us to get involved and to drive these changes.
Thank you so much, Hayley. That was Hayley Reichert. She is a London-based activist that is working to ensure that South Africans abroad have access to voting, whether they're in the UK or anywhere else. And yeah, so with elections coming up on the 29th of May locally, the expats are going to vote within the next week or so. And there is much organizing that is taking place in the foreign missions, and that was Hayley Reichert that just unpacked some of that for us.